everybody. Welcome back to John's Fantasy Football Show. It looks a little different on my end. I am currently not home. I'm in another state, so we're making it work. We're John's Fantasy Football Show is on the road currently for me. But nevertheless, the show must go on. We have our usual schedule this week, week 4 reactions, fantasy strategies, and week 5 predictions. So is that correct? We're going into week 5?
Week 6 predictions.
Oh, okay. My schedule was wrong then. So week 5 reactions going into week 6.
Right.
Like I said last time, the season's going by so fast.
It does. Every week just goes so fast.
It's nuts. It's kind of sad, but it's
Yeah.
like good and bad.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to week 5 reactions. So these are 4 players that I'm going to list, and you're just going to tell me what fantasy owners should do with them. They're players that are big names, but just haven't been performing well. So let's start off with AJ Brown from the Titans, coming off an injury, actually. What should fantasy owners do with AJ Brown?
So, yeah, like you said, he had that hamstring injury. We all know about that because they didn't have their receivers. Both him and Julio Jones were out a couple weeks ago. AJ Brown did play last week against Jacksonville, but he only had 6.8 fantasy points, so not a great day. And a lot of people that message me on Instagram are asking, telling me I'm really frustrated with AJ Brown. I don't really want him on my team anymore. Now, you could definitely shop around AJ Brown, but my recommendation would not be to do that yet. I don't know, AJ Brown, I don't know about you, Jared, but I have these guys that when I go into the draft each year for the fantasy draft, there's just guys that in my head, it just doesn't sit right with me to draft them. Like I can't pinpoint exactly why, but AJ Brown is one of them. Tyler Lockett's another. Amari Cooper is another. DJ Moore is another. Like they're all great players, but for some reason I just don't draft them because they're not consistent. Like when you think of those names, you're like, oh, wow, they can get a 30, 40 point game. Oh, but they can get like 8 points on any given day. So I draft more for consistency. Like I'll draft a DeAndre Hopkins over any of those guys that I listed, So AJ Brown, what I would suggest is keep him for the next 3 weeks because this week against Buffalo doesn't let up a lot of points to the wide receiver position, but this seems to be a high-scoring game. It's a Monday night game. The Bills are obviously going to score points on Tennessee because their defense is so bad. So they play the Bills. He's probably going to get over 10 fantasy points, which his best game this season is 14.9. So that's not that hard to beat. So he might have his best game in the season. And then next week, he plays Kansas City at home, and that's going to be high scoring. So they're going to need to throw the ball there. And then the week after that, they play Indianapolis. And we just saw what Lamar Jackson did to their defense. So my recommendation is to start AJ Brown, at least in your flex for the next 3 weeks. And then maybe after that, you could trade him because he gets the Rams and the Saints the 2 weeks after that. So I think you hold on to AJ Brown, start him in your lineups this week, but I would be fine with you trading him after the next couple weeks if he has a great game and you get a great offer from somebody else.
Yeah, I feel the same way with AJ Brown. Like I didn't draft him last year. I didn't draft him this year. Just something about like, I don't like when receivers go from like 40-point games to like 3 straight 8-point games.
Right.
Then maybe like a 30 and then back to like 8 to 10 points.
Yeah.
Our next guy was, if I remember correctly, he was the number 1 receiver in fantasy last year, was he not? Stefon Diggs?
I think he was number 2 to Devontae Adams, but he was definitely right there at the top.
Crazy. Like, is this like a buy low situation?
I think it is. And it's so funny because watching the Bills, their offense is so good, right? But none of the running backs like Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, they're not RB1. So Allen's throwing the ball a lot, and he's finding Emmanuel Sanders and Dawson Knox a lot. Now, everybody's asking me, okay, well, why, like, should I trade Emmanuel Sanders? Like, should I trade for him because he's super good? And I'm telling people, be cautious on Emmanuel Sanders. I say I would probably not trade for him. And if I had him, it's a pretty good opportunity to sell high. And I know he's on an offense that's super good, but Stefon Diggs hasn't had a 20-point game this season. 20-point fantasy game. Like that's unheard of for one of the best receivers in the league. I think it's coming this week against Tennessee. They're at Tennessee on Monday, but Tennessee gives up the most fantasy points to wide receivers. So if you have Diggs, you're definitely starting him. But if you don't have Diggs, I would try to trade for him. I've been trying to trade for him in like I think 2 of my 3 leagues. I've been trying to trade for him. I haven't been able to get him, but I think it's a perfect opportunity to buy low on Diggs because he hasn't had that 20-point game, and people are probably worried about Emmanuel Sanders and Dawson Knox taking targets away from him, which they are. But I think for the rest of the season, he has a pretty good upside. They do get a bye next week, but then they get Miami, who gives up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers after that. Then they get Jacksonville, bad defense. Then they get the Jets, bad defense. Then they get Indianapolis, bad defense. So, I mean, the schedule is lining up perfectly for Diggs. And I think the next 4 or 5 weeks, he's going to just blow out what he did in the first 5 weeks. So if you have Diggs, please don't trade him away unless you have a really, really good offer.
Let's talk about someone who's on another top AFC team, Keenan Allen. Now, Keenan Allen last year, his story was receptions. He had like the most receptions or targets or whatever last year. And now it's all going to Mike Williams. I mean, they glanced at him a couple times like last week, but like what did Keenan Allen have? Over 30 points? Like that should be Mike Williams had over 30 points, and that should be Keenan Allen. And now
Yeah,
it's like the roles have switched, like
right.
without any rhyme or reason. It's just we're gonna go to Mike Williams more because he's not injured.
Yeah, I know. I mean, he's usually injured, like you said. Last season, Mike Williams missed most of the season, and we know the story about Eckler last season. He was also hurt, so that's why Keenan Allen was just getting so many targets because they couldn't go to anybody else. Like they weren't going to throw it to like Justin Jackson out of the backfield. Maybe they did a couple times, but other than that, they just had Keenan Allen to throw to really. So he also hasn't had a 20-point game in fantasy this season. And if you have Keenan Allen, you're probably super disappointed because Mike Williams, who was drafted like 25 wide receiver spots after, is doing way better than him. Now, Mike Williams did miss 2 practices this week. He missed Wednesday and Thursday's practice. We're filming this on Friday morning, so I don't know if he's back at practice Friday, but you guys should definitely monitor that because if Mike Williams doesn't play, Keenan Allen's obviously a great start against Baltimore, and you're probably starting him anyway if you have him. But if you have Keenan Allen, he doesn't really have much trade value right now. It's kind of like Stephon Diggs probably has more trade value because he's on the Bills, probably a little bit better of an offense, and he has a bigger name than Keenan Allen. But if you have Keenan Allen, you kind of just have to wait because Mike Williams hasn't played a full season in his career. And right now, he just played the first 5 games fully healthy, but now he missed 2 practices. So it's possible that he misses this week. And then the Chargers go to Keenan Allen and they're like, oh, wow, wait, we forgot about this guy. It's kind of like, remember Kyle Pitts this past weekend? It's like
Yes.
they didn't use him. And then they're like, oh, wait, Ridley's out. Russell Gage is out. Okay, let's try to get Pitts involved. And then they're like, oh, wait, wow, this guy's actually really good. So maybe it just takes that 1 week for them to be like, oh, wow, Keenan Allen is, just as good as we remember. So let's keep using him. So I think you just got to hold on to him for now because that offense is so good. And there are a lot of mouths to feed, but Eckler and Mike Williams are some of the most injury prone guys in the NFL. So just wait for one of them to miss a game and then Allen will be right back to his old self.
Yeah, that's why I said there was like no rhyme or reason because Keenan Allen it had no injury, had no drop off, no bad year
Right.
last year. There was like there's no reason why they wouldn't go to him.
Right.
And it was just like, oh, like Mike Williams, he's healthy today. Like, let's give him some targets. Although
Yeah.
1 week that I start Mike Williams, he gets 2 points. So I don't even want to talk about Mike Williams anymore. The next guy, who he's got a new quarterback, a
Yeah.
veteran, but a new quarterback, Tyler Lockett. What do you think of Tyler Lockett? But I think this is gonna go into what do you think of Geno Smith? Do you really trust Geno Smith?
Yeah, and to be honest, I really don't trust Geno Smith and Lockett. Like I said before, he's another one of those guys. Even with Russell Wilson at quarterback, I didn't draft in fantasy because I hate that he gets like 40 points or 30 points, and then he gets like five, and then the next week you're like, oh wait, maybe he's going to bounce back, and then he gets five again, and then you're like, oh wow, no, okay, he's not going to do good, and then he gets 40 and he's on your bench. So it's so hard to predict, but honestly, if you have Lockett, it's kind of a tough position you're in because he has Geno Smith at quarterback. Now, this week against Pittsburgh, everybody's talking about the fact that Pittsburgh's secondary is just absolutely horrible. We saw Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick go have pretty good games against them last week. And this week, DK and Lockett are even better. But Geno Smith, I'm a little bit worried about. I think they're going to take a running approach to this game. And I think this is going to be low scoring. Both offenses, I don't expect Seattle to score a lot of points. And I don't expect, Pittsburgh to be able to score a lot of points, even though their both respective defenses are horrible. But Lockett, he had 26 points week one, 31.8 week two, and then he hasn't hit 11 points in any of the previous 3 weeks. So, and that was with Russell Wilson. So I think if anything, it's getting worse for Lockett. If you have Lockett this week, you're going to probably start him in your flex because of how bad that Pittsburgh secondary is. But if you're in a 6 or 8 team league or maybe even 10 team league, I would err on the side of caution and probably not start him this week. But if he has a good week, which is possible, maybe look to trade him away. I know Russ is probably coming back maybe after the bye, but I'm just not a Lockett fan in terms of fantasy. I think he's a great receiver. That deep ball, he's great at catching, but I think that, he should be put on the bench or traded away. Um, One thing I did want to mention real quick, I just got an update on my phone. Did you get the same thing or no?
No, no.
Zach Ertz was just traded to the Arizona Cardinals for a cornerback Tay Gowan and a 2022 fifth round pick.
Because Max Williams is out for the season.
Yeah,
Oh,
they were using Max Williams, and now I actually really like that trade
that's
for
nice for Ertz, but like for Eagles fans, he just had a touchdown yesterday.
yeah, and he had 4 catches, 30 yards, and a touchdown. And Goddard is injured, so I thought they liked the two tight end like system they had, but I
Yay.
mean, if you have so now for fantasy purposes, if you have Goddard, then you definitely have to keep him. Or if nobody has Goddard in your league, you need to pick him up. And same thing with Ertz, because now they were both in a two tight end system, and now they're both the number one tight end on the team. Now, obviously, Ertz, it's going to take him a few weeks to get the targets that he deserves, but they were using Max Williams. He already had a couple touchdowns. I think he had 2 touchdowns against the Rams or something. So
Yeah.
like they like to use their tight end. So definitely, if you have Ertz, definitely keep him. You might have picked him up for this past week's game because Goddard was out. So keep him, or if nobody has him, pick him up. And then Goddard, same thing.
Man, we're gonna have to check on Caleb.
Yeah.
Ertz was there for the Super Bowl that they
Yeah. That,
won.
that team is dwindling down. That Super Bowl team.
Oh man, that sucks. That really sucks. Oh, all right. Let's transition into that's what a great timed notification.
Yeah, that was perfect.
Let's transition into some fantasy strategies as always. Now, these are strategies that John uses to win his fantasy leagues. I think you have a pretty nice record over the last 5 or 6 years. And he's also first place in our league. So, and in your other league this year, your two
Yeah.
leagues, you're in first place right now.
Yeah. I'm in 3 leagues. I'm in first in all of them, but undefeated in one of them.
That's
So
ridiculous. So, yeah, these are strategies that you could just implement weekly. You can implement even right now. And one of them is preparing for bye weeks. And bye weeks are starting to come up now more frequently. I know a lot of players have like week 7 buys, like week 11 buys. They're all like the same. So, like, how do
right.
you prepare for that?
Exactly. Just like you said, preparing for the bye weeks, the first 5 weeks of the season went super fast. And now we're sitting here in week 6. And for you guys listening, it's Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon. And we're looking at, or as good fantasy owners, we're going to be looking at the week ahead. So let's take a look at our lineup for week 7. And NFL in week 7, like Jared, you said, there's a lot of teams on buys and a lot of high profile teams. The Buffalo Bills are on bye week 7. So are the Dallas Cowboys, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Minnesota Vikings, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that's a lot of teams. That's a lot of high profile players. If you have top quarterbacks like Dak or Herbert or even Kirk Cousins or Josh Allen, you're going to need a backup. And if you have Josh Allen, you might not have a backup on your team already. Or if you have one of the receivers like Diggs, Emmanuel Sanders, Amari Cooper, CD Lamb, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Jefferson, Thielen, you're going to look Deontay Johnson, you're going to need somebody to fill in that spot. So right now, the Saturday before week 6 is when you can go into your league and you can get some of these guys as free agents, the guys that are available that you're going to plug into your lineup the next week. I talked about this when streaming defenses, thinking a week ahead. So for some quarterbacks that you might be able to pick up now, so that you pick up these guys so that when it comes around for the waiver on Tuesday, that you already have them on your team. You don't have to worry about somebody else being like, if you have Josh Allen and somebody else has Dak, and then you guys are both trying to waiver for somebody and then they get them, it's like, oh, wow, that stinks. But if you pick the guy up now, then you'll have a leg up on the other guy. So some quarterbacks that have good matchups next week, Jameis Winston is playing Seattle. I know that you might not trust Jameis Winston, but Seattle has a very bad defense. And with Geno Smith on the other side, the Saints should get a lot of opportunities. Also, Tua might come back this week, and we'll see him against the Jaguars in London. But even if he doesn't come back this week, next week he plays at home against Atlanta. Or you have Sam Darnold at the Giants. Or you have Matt Ryan at Miami. Gave up the 6th most fantasy points to quarterbacks so far this season. So those are some quarterbacks that you might be able to pick up. If you have an open spot, pick them up. If you have Josh Allen, Dak, Justin Herbert, Kirk Cousins, guys that are going to have buys next week. Some wide receivers you could pick up now, Brandon Ayuk. I know Kittle is on IR, so it's Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk show. And Garoppolo is going to come back this week or next, or this week they have a bye. So they're probably game planning for Deebo and Ayuk to get a lot of targets. And they play Indianapolis next week. Another guy is Rondale Moore. He plays Houston next week. So all these guys have good matchups. Let me look at some of the running backs that might have good matchups. Brandon Bolden on New England. Damian Harris is a little banged up. They play the Jets next week. So some guys like this that you could pick up right now, a week before, so that you have them on your team and you're going to plug them in for one of your receivers, one of your quarterbacks, one of your running backs that have a bye next week. Because if you don't do it now, you're going to have to wait until the waiver on Tuesday into Wednesday morning. And then you're going to be like, oh, shoot, what if this guy picks up, Matt Ryan? Then I won't have him for this week and I'll have to go with, Tua or something. So pick up the guy now if you have the open spot, so you get one leg up ahead of the other guy.
What are your thoughts on picking up players that are coming off a bye? Do you think that it's beneficial to do that, or is maybe the rest not helpful? Have you looked into that?
I think that's a really good question, and I feel very strongly one way about it. I think picking up a guy off of a bye, especially if it's a receiver or a running back, it's a really good idea. And if you remember, my best prediction from last season was DeAndre Swift. He was a rookie and he had one game that I forget what team he was playing, but remember, it was like, I think it might've been overtime or the last minute of the 4th quarter. And he went into the end zone for a catch from Stafford and he dropped it. Right. So everybody's like, oh my gosh, Swift sucks. Like, that's why we lost the game. Right. So they had a bye the next week. And I was reading some articles and they were like, oh, they want to get Swift more involved. And I was like, look, he just missed that touchdown catch. I think they're going to want to give him like a redemption, So that week they had a bye and then they were playing the Jaguars the next week. I'm like, all right, they'll probably be leading that game against the Jaguars. They'll have to run the ball a lot. So they're going to probably get Swift involved like a lot Like they actually had him in the game with a minute left in the fourth quarter, so they kind of trust him. I think they're going to want to give him redemption, and they did just that. I said he was going to get 2 touchdowns, which was absurd to say that, but he ended up getting over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns and had a huge fantasy game. So somebody like Brandon Ayuk or one of these receivers or running backs that you think they can get more involved after the bye week? Because look what Kyle Shanahan is doing this week. What do you think he's doing? He knows Garoppolo's coming back. He knows Kittle is on IR, and he knows Deebo Samuel is going to be keyed on by other defenses. So I think this is the week. I think Ayuk could be a good streaming option next week against Indianapolis. So if you pick him up this week, that would be awesome. So I think it's great to pick up guys off their bye because that's when you game plan. That's when you script plays for certain people and certain players.
Yeah, I always wonder that. I know there's like some stats for different quarterbacks, like, oh, they're 14-0 in their career when they're off a bye. Like there's certain
Yeah.
quarterbacks that just thrive off the bye, and there's some that are like 2-14 off the bye.
Yeah.
So it can go either way.
True.
Um, all right, let's move on to our last one. It's week 5 predictions. So there's games that John loves, games that John hates, impact injuries, weekly picks, and must sits as always. So let's start with games that you love, John.
So as of the last 4 weeks, I think 4 straight weeks, the first game that I mentioned in this segment is the Chiefs game. And last week it actually worked out also. And this week the Chiefs play the Washington football team. And if anybody has been watching the Washington football team, you know that they have a really bad defense. Last year they had a great defense. This year it's been horrible. Jameis Winston had that Hail Mary to Marquez Callaway at the end of halftime or at the right before halftime last week. They gave up so many points to the Saints. They've given up points to everybody. This is a game that the Chiefs are just going to go off. I think by halftime, they'll be winning by almost 20 points. And then in the second half, Washington, Heineke, McLaurin, Seals Jones, they're going to come back and make it a game. But I think this is going to be a high scoring game, the highest scoring game of the week. So if you have guys like Tyreek Hill, if you have Kelsey, if you have Darrell Williams, put him in your lineups. Mahomes, obviously, you're starting. Heineke is a good streaming option. McLaurin, you're starting. And I like Ricky Seals-Jones. If you saw my TikTok this week, I said you guys should pick him up. It's a perfect opportunity because Logan Thomas is on IR. So it's perfect opportunity. He had 8 targets last week, did Seals-Jones. So I think this week he's going to get probably 8 to 10 targets. I think he's going to find the end zone and have over 10 to 15 fantasy points. The second game is the Chargers and Ravens. We saw the Chargers and Browns score almost 100 points combined. And then we saw the Ravens and Colts score almost 70 combined. So this is obviously a game that could be low scoring, but both offenses have been amazing so far. So I like that game. If you have any of those guys, obviously Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson, you're starting them if you have them. And then obviously Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Herbert, and Eckler, you're starting all of them if you have them.
I'm definitely starting them. I benched him last week. I benched Lamar. I benched Mark Andrews. I'm
You have
starting
them
them this
both
week.
in? All right,
Yes,
good.
they're not leaving fast. They're not leaving their spots, I swear.
I mean, you don't have much of, you have Pitts on your team and he's on a bye. So
Yeah, so I
really,
just have Dawson Knox and I have Gesicki, but I think I just dropped Gesicki. And then for quarterback, I had Hurts. So he started last week or yesterday and he got 26.
oh,
So
okay.
not
Okay. Yeah.
great performance, but
Right. I think you're set with Lamar and Andrews.
yeah.
And then the last game I like is the Seahawks and Steelers. Obviously, both of their defenses have been bad. Obviously, Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool and Najee Harris are the only 3 guys you're starting on the Steelers. And then it depends on your team and what other matchups your guys have. But DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. DK, you're definitely starting no matter what. But Lockett, you're probably going to start in your flex. But it depends on your other matchups. You might not want to start him if you're worried about Geno Smith.
All right, let's move on to games you hate. One of these is very surprising, and I think we should start off with it. Cowboys, Patriots. Cowboys offense, I think, has not scored under 30 points.
Really?
I, I, I
I think I don't know.
maybe
I think
not, but
I
their
feel like
offense has just been clicking.
yeah, it's really good. And honestly, this game, I think they might score 30 points because the way to beat the Patriots is on the ground. And guess what the Cowboys have been doing the last few weeks? They've been just running the ball with Zeke and Pollard, giving each of them like Zeke 20 carries a game and then Pollard at least 10. So they're running it over 30 times a game. which obviously if you have Dak and Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz, you're not happy about. But if you have Zeke, oh my gosh, he's guaranteed over 20 points this week because it's going to be a running game. The Patriots even like to run the ball. So I would just be careful about Dak and Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb this week, which I'll talk about later, and Dalton Schultz. But if you have Zeke, you're starting him. And then as far as the Patriots go, Jacoby Myers is probably a start, but other than that, like how many other guys, like if you had CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, Dalton Schultz, Dak, like how confident would you be in starting them? Like I'm just confident in like Jacoby Myers on the Patriots and Zeke on the Cowboys.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. And
So the next game I had as games to hate is the Packers and Bears. Now, the Bears actually played pretty good defense against Las Vegas last week, and the Packers obviously usually get the best of the Bears. So I think the Packers will win this game, but I think it's in Chicago, which should make it a little bit lower scoring for Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon have both been not splitting work. Aaron Jones has gotten a little bit more. If you have Aaron Jones, you're starting him. If you have Devontae Adams, expect a good game. And I started Aaron Rodgers over Tom Brady in one of my leagues this week. I think Brady had just under 20 fantasy points, so seems like that's going to be a good decision. But if you have Rodgers, definitely start him. And then for the Bears, the only guy I would start is I don't even know if I would start Allen Robinson or Darnell Mooney. I would be careful about starting them depending on what other guys you have on your team and their matchups. The only guy I would start on the Bears is Khalil Herbert because Damian Williams, who I'll talk about in a minute, he got put on the COVID list yesterday or the day before. So he's probably not going to play. I picked up Khalil Herbert. He's in one of my 12 team leagues as my RB2. So, I mean, just transitioning into injuries, that was the first one I was going to talk about is Damian Williams got put on the
yeah,
COVID
I have
list.
him freaking starting. You gotta be
In
kidding me.
which league do you have him?
Our 12 man, oh, well, my 12-man league.
12 man. So if Herbert is available, you could pick him up and put him in, but you shouldn't drop Damian Williams for him because Damian Williams will probably be back next week. So just a consideration there. If you're worried about Khalil Herbert, I wouldn't be too worried because he's going to get most of the snaps, most of the catches. I think he's going to get his floor is 10 points. So I think he's going to get probably 14 to 15 fantasy points. And I'd be happy with that as an RB2. I mean, do
Yeah.
you have anybody else on your bench that you would put in for
Yeah,
Williams?
I put in Melvin Gordon, but Melvin Gordon's also questionable.
Yeah. Do you have anybody else on your bench or no?
No, I got Kamara, he's on a bye. I got Cordell Patterson, he's on a bye.
Oh, shoot. Who's your RB1 this week then?
Devonta Booker.
Oh, shoot. You got two RB2s in there.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Gordon's not horrible this week. I actually like Javonte Williams this week because Gordon didn't practice Wednesday. He was back limited Thursday. I don't know what he's going to do Friday, but it's a risky putting in Gordon, but
It's
yeah,
tough. There's so many people are questionable
so
this
many.
week.
Yeah, there's so many injuries. I mean, the list of injuries I have right here. I mean, I'll fly through them real quick. CMC doesn't seem like he's going to play. So if you dropped Hubbard, then try to pick him back up because he's going to start this week. And yeah, if you have Hubbard, don't drop him because if CMC stays out or gets re-injured, Hubbard's going to keep starting. So another one is DeAndre Hopkins didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday due to an illness. And now, if he plays, you're probably going to start him because he's D-Hop, but another guy, Rondale Moore, could possibly have a good game. Mike Williams didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday. I don't know about Friday. Hopefully he comes back today to practice. But if he plays, you're also starting him because he's been amazing. Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb both didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday. So if one of them doesn't play, the other one is an immediate RB1 and a must start on Sunday against the Cardinals. And then Jefferson and Thielen both didn't practice Wednesday and Thursday. So if one of them doesn't play, the other one is a must start as well. So just be careful about the injuries. I also had Tyreek Hill, didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday because of a quad contusion. So be careful about Tyreek Hill. If he plays, you're obviously starting him. But what I wanted to talk about, which the next segment is the weekly picks. Now, Spoiler alert, I don't, same as last week, I don't have a weekly pick to give you guys, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through some of my predictions and some of the guys that I have on my list because like I said last week, I have a bunch of guys on a list in my notes app in my phone that I'm considering for my weekly pick. So I'm going to run through them and I'm going to start with Mecole Hardman. Like I said, Tyreek Hill didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday. Now, what I talked about last week, and I usually talk about this, is what happens when a guy misses practice. Is what do you think Andy Reid is doing? Do you think he's like, oh, Tyreek Hill isn't practicing, so let's just like not really practice that hard or like run any plays because like Tyreek is injured, so we can't really like script anything. No, he's probably like, okay, well, next guy up is Mecole Hardman. So, okay, let's try to script some plays for him because Tyreek might not be able to play the whole game because they don't want to be like, all right, let's get to Sunday and then be like, oh, Tyreek just got injured and he can't return for the rest of the game. Now we have no scripted plays for Mecole Hardman. So they're going to script some plays now for Mecole Hardman. So if Tyreek doesn't play, Mecole Hardman is going to be one of my weekly picks. If Hill does play, but he didn't practice today, Friday, I think Mecole Hardman still might be one of my weekly picks because this is going to be a high scoring game. I think Mecole Hardman's going to get a touchdown. So I think Mecole Hardman's a good flex play this week. And then another guy, DeAndre Hopkins, didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday. It doesn't seem like he's going to practice today, Friday. So Rondale Moore is the next guy up. And they're playing the Browns, who just let Mike Williams have two long touchdowns, one 72-yarder and one like 50-yarder. So if D Hop doesn't play, Rondale Moore is the next guy up, and they could take some deep shots to him. They have before. So I think Rondale Moore is also a good option. And like I said about next week, he has a good matchup against Houston next week. So it's a perfect opportunity. If nobody has Rondale Moore, pick him up this week because if D Hop doesn't play, you need to put Rondale Moore in your lineups. And even if D Hop does, I think Rondale Moore is a possible streaming option. So those are two guys I liked. And another guy I like is Javonte Williams. If Melvin Gordon doesn't play, I like Javonte Williams. But Javonte Williams has broken out a big play, like over 30 or 40 yards in each of the last 3 weeks. Last week, I think he had a 49-yard run. And I think he had half the carries that Melvin Gordon did, and he had double the amount of yards. So his production is way better than Melvin Gordon's right now, and Melvin Gordon is questionable. So I really like Javonte Williams, another rookie running back that last year I predicted Swift, and last week I predicted Kadarius Toney, a rookie, to have his breakout. So this week might be Rondale Moore and might be Javonte Williams, two rookies. So we'll see. We'll have to keep an eye on Melvin Gordon's status. Another guy I said before, Jacoby Myers. I don't know if you guys have seen the stat that Jared, I don't know if you've seen this, but Jacoby Myers has the most catches in NFL history to start a career without a touchdown. He has over 100 catches in his NFL career, and he has yet to catch a touchdown, which is insane.
What year is he in?
I think he's like second or third year.
That's incredible. That's so unlucky.
It's crazy because when you think of the Patriots, you're probably like, all right, who's their number one receiver? You're like, oh, it's Jacoby Myers, but he's never caught a touchdown in his career, let alone this season. So I think against the Cowboys, it's a good matchup. And if he doesn't do it this week, he'll probably do it next week against the Jets. So depending on the injuries and everything, I might have Jacoby Myers as one of my weekly picks because he's due for a touchdown one of these games. I also I talked about that Chiefs game. Taylor Heineke is a good streaming option this week at quarterback. And then Ricky Seals-Jones, I think if you watch my TikTok, I think he's the biggest sleeper tight end right now. And I think he has 10 targets and a touchdown this week against Kansas City. And then the last guy, Joe Mixon, he's a little bit of a bigger name than the other guys that I mentioned, but Mixon, it depends on his practice status this week. He only played 28% of snaps last week. If he gets back to full health by the end of the week against the Lions, it's a great matchup. But if he doesn't get back to full health and they think he might be limited, he won't be one of my weekly picks because P. Ryan or Chris Evans might get mixed in. So those are the options. I mean, what do you think of those guys? Any guys that you think you would pick up and put in any of your lineups this week?
If Javonte Williams is available in my 12-man, I think I would rather have him than Melvin Gordon.
Right.
The reason I picked up Gordon this year, like in the draft, was because of Melvin Gordon's touchdowns. They just use him at the goal line. So even if he has like 50 yards rushing, he could have 2 goal line touchdowns, and that's good enough for the week,
Right.
But if Williams is going to be the guy this week, if they're going to limit Gordon's touches, then I would probably look and see. I don't think he's available, which sucks.
Yeah. I mean,
But
obviously you'll have to monitor it as the week continues because
right.
so many people question him and they like sometimes they're like, oh yeah, he's limited and he's questionable to play. And then they're like, oh, we expect him to play. And then he gets like a lot of carries. But sometimes they're like, oh yeah, we expect him to play, but we're gonna just use Javonte Williams more. So
Yes.
you'll just have to see the reports.
Yeah, he's not available, but Herbert is. So Khalil Herbert.
Yeah, I mean, if
That's trending.
yeah, if news comes out that Melvin Gordon, like you'll have to look up some articles Saturday night, Sunday morning, and if they're like, oh, Melvin Gordon's going to play, but we might limit him a little bit, or he's a game time decision or something, then
Yeah.
honestly, Khalil Herbert's the number one back in Chicago. So either you have a number
Yeah.
one back on a worse team, or you have, a guy that's going to split carries. And Javonte Williams, to be honest, I think I think you guys, anybody listening, should try to trade for him in fantasy because I think it's like a DeAndre Swift situation last season. Like I think this could be the week or next week. Javonte Williams is due for a breakout game, 100 yards and a touchdown, and everybody's going to want him on their fantasy team. So try to trade for him, pick him up if nobody has him, because at some point Melvin Gordon's been questionable every week. At some point, Javonte Williams is just going to take over the starting role.
Yeah, I just picked him up.
Wait, he was available?
Herbert. No, I picked up Herbert.
Who'd you drop?
Noah Fant.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah, it's whatever. So you just did your weekly picks or your thoughts for your weekly picks, but do you have a must sit?
I do have a must sit, and it's actually a high profile guy, and it's probably maybe taking a little bit of a chance. If you guys watched my live last week, I talked about I actually, this was probably my worst week must sit week was last week because I got the first one right was Brandon Cooks, and I told you guys, I think I told you guys on this podcast last week, but I said Brandon Cooks you should definitely sit, and I think he had like 3 or 4 points, which was great. But then, to be honest, I really wasn't confident about my must sits, and I was waiting for the injury report to come out at 11:30, and I was going live on TikTok at 12, and it was legit like 11:50, and I'm like sweating. I'm like, shoot, I don't even have my other 2 must sits. Like, I don't, because I wasn't really confident about anybody, but I couldn't leave it blank. So I was like, I threw Antonio Gibson because he was like questionable throughout the week. He ended up with 2 touchdowns against the Saints. And then I put Mike Williams because I thought that Cleveland and Chargers game was going to be low scoring, and he had his best game of the season. So
it was like by halftime for Mike Williams, you're like, yeah, these must sits suck.
yeah, I'm like, we're going to have to just forget about this week. So I'll try to be more confident for you guys this week. But my first weekly sit or must sit this week is Amari Cooper. I talked about that Patriots Cowboys game. I really do think it's going to be low scoring. I think JC Jackson, who was covering Brandon Cooks last week and held him to 3 or 4 fantasy points, he's probably going to be on Amari Cooper. And like I said, I think Zeke's going to have a big game. It's going to be a running and defensive game. CeeDee Lamb, I would probably start over Amari Cooper. But remember, Amari Cooper has had that hamstring injury. And the last few games, he's missed a couple snaps because of it. So if he has that, along with JC Jackson covering him, I don't think he's going to hit 15 fantasy points. So, but a couple other guys that might be on my list for the upcoming on Sunday is Chase Edmonds against the Browns. He was questionable last week. He had his worst game of the season. So I don't know about him. Obviously, I'll have to monitor the injury. Dalton Schultz against the Patriots. Patriots are number 1. They give up the least fantasy points to tight ends. So I told somebody yesterday, Thursday, to put in Ertz over Schultz. So Ertz did have a touchdown. And then one of the Vikings players against the Panthers. I think the Panthers defense has been playing really well, especially the secondary. So I think with Jefferson and Thielen, they're both questionable, mispractice Wednesday, Thursday. So if they both play, maybe one of them, maybe Thielen, I might want to sit. I don't know. I'll have to keep up the injuries. So, I mean, I don't really know. Other than Amari Cooper, I don't really have many other must sits. So stay tuned for the TikTok on Sunday to see my other 2 must sits. But definitely the first is going to be Amari Cooper.
Amazing. All right. Well, we can wrap this up super quick then. Thank you guys so much for joining us on our improvised version of John's Fantasy Football Show. Um, if you made it this far and you liked all the content, make sure you hit subscribe, make sure you hit like, comment down below any questions you have for John going forward. He'll be answering questions up until Sunday during his live. And make sure to catch us live. It's going to be noon Eastern Standard Time Sunday. Going to be from noon to usually like 12:45, 12:50.
Yeah.
There's Q&A, there's the rest of his weekly picks, the rest of his must sits, weekly rankings, all stuff like that. And then make sure you go over to the TikTok and follow us on there at Dorm Debate Podcast, as well as our Instagram, same thing at Dorm Debate Podcast. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you guys next week. Okay.